This is section 1.6, part 1. We're going to look at graphing inequalities on a number line. So we're going to look at 4 different problems here. We're going to start out with number 1. This is read x is less than 5. So I've got a number line already drawn out here. I typically make number lines with about 5 tick marks. And when I'm just working with one number, I typically put that number right in the center. So I'll start with 5 and I'll count up to 6, 7, count down to 4, 3. So we've got the less than symbol. And if you remember from previous courses, less than is going to have an open circle. Alright, less than is open. We do not fill it in because we want to include all numbers less than 5. It does not include 5. That's what the open circle represents. And so all numbers less than 5 will be lower than 5. So we will shade in the rest of the number line lower than 5. And if you wanted to check to see if you were true, or if you did it correctly, take any number lower than 5, or in the direction in which you shaded, and you can plug it in for x. So I can plug in, let's say, 3, and I'll plug in 3 for x, and see if this is true. Is 3 really less than 5? And it is. So we know we've shaded in the correct direction. In the second one, we can see x is greater than or equal to negative 2. So whenever we have a little line underneath this symbol, we know it's going to also include that number. Alright, so we want to make sure we include negative 2. So I'm going to put negative 2 in the center, and I'm going to grow. So next number larger than negative 2 is negative 1, then 0. Here we've got negative 3 and negative 4. Alright, so these numbers are decreasing. So again, I'm going to put a circle at negative 2. But because we want to include negative 2, that is represented by a closed circle. Alright, so closed circle means it's going to also include negative 2 because it can be equal to it. Open circle doesn't include that number. So we want all numbers greater than negative 2. So we want to shade all numbers greater than negative 2. So I'll do that here. And again, we can check. Alright, by making sure we pick a number, so 0. Is 0 greater than or equal to negative 2? And it is. So we know we've done that one correctly. Next, we're going to get down to compound inequalities. One is an and one is an or. So number 3, we can see negative 1 is less than x, which is less than 2.5. Right, this is a compound inequality, and it is what we call an and inequality. And so, the next one down here, x is less than or equal to negative 2, or x is greater than 0.5. This is our or inequality. Alright, and we can see that's because we have an or in the problem. So, let's get to graphing. Alright, so we'll graph the third one first. Alright, so let's put our numbers in. So we want to make sure we span from negative 1 to 2.5. So in this case, maybe you do need more than 5 tick marks. So I'm going to put negative 1, the lowest number here, and I'll count up. So I've got 0, 1, 2, 3. So in this case, I'm not going to need 3 tick marks. Notice each of the symbols are less than or greater than, right, depending on how you're reading the problem. But there is no line underneath them, so we are going to use open circles. So I'm going to go to negative 1, put an open circle at negative 1, and I also want another open circle at 2.5. Notice 2.5 doesn't have a tick mark, so you can just guesstimate where it's going to be. And just as we did in previous lessons, if we're putting or marking a number that's not represented by a tick mark, I will write that number right above its marking, so above that open circle. So we want to shade all numbers, so x is actually greater than negative 1, so I want to make sure I'm shading all numbers greater than negative 1, but x is also less than 2.5, so I want to shade all numbers less than 2.5. So it looks like I'm going to shade in between each of these circles. And if you wanted to check, you can come on, pick any number. I'll pick 0, and you'll plug that in for the value of x. So I've got negative 1 is less than 0, which is true. And is 0 less than 2.5? Yes. So it's true. So a nice little trick is what I tell my students is and means you shade in. So and is in, or we're actually going to shade out. And that will always be true. And you're going to shade the inside between the numbers, or you'll see in a second, you're going to shade outside. So going into infinity in the positive and into infinity in the negative direction. And you'll see that shortly. So let's look at number 4, the or. Alright, so I've got x is less than or equal to negative 2. Alright, so I'm going to put negative 2 here, and then I'm going to count up. So negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. So I want to make sure I put a circle at negative 2, and should I shade it? Yes, because it's less than or equal to. You want to make sure you fill in your circle. And I also have another circle at 0.5, which is about right here. I'll label that 0.5. And it's going to stay an open circle because we don't have that little equal mark underneath the symbol. So we want to make sure we're shading x is less than or equal to negative 2, so all numbers less than, so it's going the left direction here, or x is greater than 0.5, all numbers greater than 0.5 in this direction. So you can see our and in or out actually holds true here. So if that helps you, make sure you note that down and try and memorize and in or out. And lastly, we're going to check. So I'm going to need 2 checks here with the or. Alright, so when you have or, only one needs to be true. Alright, so if I'm checking the less than, I'm only going to need to have to check this to make sure it's true. So I need to pick a number less than or equal to negative 2. So let's pick negative 4. Is that really less than or equal to negative 2? Yes. Well, what about this side? Pick a number larger than 0.5, which could be 2. Is 2 greater than 0.5? And it is.